Welcome to The Unlikely Executive, the podcast for leaders who never expected to end up in charge, but are determined to do it well. I'm Barbra Carlisle, executive coach to founders, CEOs, and purpose-led leaders who want clarity, confidence, and a team that thrives. Each episode, I dive into real conversations with leaders who've navigated pressures and big decisions so that you can lead with courage, honesty, and impact. Let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to The Unlikely Executive. I'm Barbra Carlisle, the host, and today I have the pleasure of talking to Claire Brown, who is Senior Sustainability Consultant with Turner Townsend, which is a construction design engineering firm based in the UK but operating globally, I believe. I introduced her as a sustainability consultant, but I'm going to leave it to Claire to actually tell us what she really does, because really the sustainability consultant is just the tip of the iceberg. Hi, Claire.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for having me. And I think it's funny when people say, what do you do? And I kind of say, well, I do lots of things, and I love that I get to do lots of things. But if you looked at my CV, I would probably say, absolutely, starting off with that I work for a global consultancy. I get to work on amazing projects for retrofit in the UK, which I absolutely love. But I also do lots of other things. So I sit on a board of a social landlord up in the northwest of England. I also work really closely with my professional institute, so ICEP, which was IEMA, and so I co-chair the Northwest Steering Group. And I recently, and probably a big one, submitted my PhD in heating and cooling demand in new UK social housing, really looking at it in the context of climate change and how what we build will need to reflect what that future climate is going to look.
Wow. And you've mentioned a couple of acronyms in there. Would you mind telling the audience what the acronyms mean?
Of course I can.
Oh, we could have a guess, but I'm not sure. Take your day to guess.
My experience of being a consultant, acronyms just get flown around all the time, don't they? So ICEP is the Institute of Sustainability and Environmental Professionals. It was IEMA, which was the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment. And so it's the professional institute for anyone who would, I guess, put themselves under the banner of a sustainable professional.
And sustainability has obviously been around for a long time, and from my observation has got more momentum in the last sort of 10 years. But you've spent your whole career in this space, really, haven't you, Claire? And what was it like back in the day when you did you do it at university? Did you go to uni and study sort of environment? Or
I did, but in a interesting perspective. So I actually did landscape planning and management, and we had a placement in our fourth year where I went and did a placement at Manchester Airport, and so got exposed to the broad operational challenges that a large organisation faces, and realised that whilst I did love landscape, I still love landscapes, I love trees, I love habitats, I love ecosystems. Actually, what really fascinated me was the way that we interact, the way that we manage. And so I think that really then shaped my career. Obviously, aviation has its own interesting challenge and morality to flying in terms of the impacts and causational links around climate change. But it really, as a young person, really gave me a really nice grounding in all of the things that we need to be considering. So carbon, energy, water, waste is an absolute massive challenge. And that then kind of led me on to working on highways projects. But I kind of felt really drawn more to the built environment. So that's kind of where I've kind of gone. I've worked for the public sector as well. So I worked for a police force, which was incredibly eye-opening in terms of the scope and the challenge around managing a large estate with complex buildings, with high energy consumption, to leading me to work for a construction company as well, which again, being on site is one of my most favourite things, and talking to people about how to build an efficiency, how to do things better, how to reduce environmental impact of what we do, which then kind of led me to explore research, and I found that absolutely fascinating. But I also love that piece around learning and development, comms and engagement, and how we talk to people about sustainability issues.
Yeah. Can I ask you about, going back to what you said about working in the police, that was under the from what you've just implied. It was dealing with the built assets, the bricks and mortar.
Yeah.
How did the police force embrace the sustainability consultant at that point? And there's no fingers blamed at the police, but about those big institutions, when somebody like yourself, who's very passionate, comes in and tries to support them to create a more sustainable built asset. What's the pushback that you experienced, if any?
I realised really quickly that language and vocabulary and communications were essential to me achieving change. And things like directly talking to the Chief Constable about what I was talking about, but reflecting it in terms of what mattered to him. It was a male Chief Constable at that stage, and reflecting that actually budget management is a massive challenge for any organisation in the public sector. I was there during the comprehensive spending review, and over 90 million was cut from the budget. So what I had to do was pivot and really reframe what I was talking about away from carbon.
Right.
And I had to frame it under money. So I talked a lot about if we turned off our lights in our police stations when we weren't using them, we could save X amount of money, which is the equivalent to, and I used to do things really specifically. So I used to do things about number of stab vests. So police officers operational have to wear stab vests. So there's a cost associated with a new stab vest. So I could easily equate it to the number of stab vests that would save. And those numbers were quite big. And so that made people wake up. And that translation of using vocabulary and using language that people understood really enabled some significant success in terms of driving change, talking about it, listening as well. I think definitely that was a point where listening to perspectives has really helped me frame how I like to manage projects and manage teams that I manage as well, making sure that the listening part is a real thread that goes through that.
And how do you listen when somebody's getting on your nerves and irritating you and your message isn't landing? How do you self-regulate?
That's a great question. And I realised I didn't answer about the pushback as well. Pushback I had was around carbon, not around finance. So I found that was my way in.
Yeah.
And when you have conflict and resistance, it is about listening, and it's about, for me, it's about reframing, how we talk about it. So I've been in discussions with multidisciplinary groups for, say, new build public realm projects. And I have had disagreements with M&E engineers about energy consumption for suggested systems that are going in. So rather than saying my way is the only way, it's about working it out and saying, well, why isn't something going to work? Could we look at a different opportunity and explore what that might mean? And if that isn't going to be successful or suitable, then we have to move on, because there are other fights, I think, sometimes to win. And certainly with that project, it was about asking the question in the first place, because that project had been on a particular trajectory and there hadn't been a lot of challenge to any of the decision making. And so when myself and a colleague came in on that project, we just asked lots of questions about, what was the decision around this? What was the decision around that? And I think sometimes, and is important, is to kind of own the space and also know your knowledge and understand that sometimes you don't have that knowledge, and it's okay to sometimes say, I'll get back to you on that clarification, and make sure that you then, kind of follow up. And I think that's, again, something that I have learned over time around essentially staying true to yourself, but also recognizing that everyone does not know everything. And sometimes we need to take that time and go back and look at something.
Yeah. You sound a bit like a coach, Claire, really, in that sense, the listening part, the still addressing the challenge or the elephant in the room, but accepting that, it might not be the right time or it's not the right battle to fight at that particular moment, but it's that creating that space and also asking the questions from a place of curiosity and you're trying to dig at the root cause. And it's great that you were reflecting back
the value or the impact in terms of the monetary impact or the stab vests or the feed for the horses, because it has to be relatable, doesn't it? Especially around sustainability. I do get a sense sometimes that when somebody starts talking about carbon, people roll their eyes, forget about the conversation, or start thinking about something else, because it's been so much in the news, but so much of it is, how do we actually measure that carbon reduction? Is quite a mystery or a bit of a guess, in my opinion, for many things. Do people actually respect what's actually being done to analyse what is effective carbon reduction?
So I'm also a carbon literacy facilitator, so we do training on essentially the literacy of carbon. So I was lucky enough to witness Richard Smith at the BBC doing that training. It was an amazing opportunity to see actually how small measures and just challenging what we do and reflecting that actually we could do things differently and more efficiently can really reap some benefits. So things like getting people to just think about their daily decisions that they make. Do you drive? Do you go on your bike? But whatever it is, it's about thinking, okay, well, actually, does it have to be that? Or what do you do? Do you take 6 flights a year? Do you not go on holiday? Where do you get your stuff from? Do you always buy new? Do you buy local? And it's tapping into what really matters to people. And sometimes that takes time to find out what matters to people. And I think that's, again, a really powerful skill to have. And sometimes not talking about carbon is actually a good way of doing it. So one thing I've started to do recently with my board position is we've been talking about kind of net zero. So the UK has a net zero target for 2050. But actually, when we talk about social housing in particular, we're talking about asset management. We're talking about managing homes to mean that they are efficient, that they are safe and warm. So it's thinking about how do we use the water in that space? Can we generate our own electricity using the roof space? Can we enable people to control their heating to means that they are then thermally comfortable? And so it's around changing how things get put into silos, and quite often things get put into those little neat compartments, but actually what we need is more collaboration and more discussion. And it comes back to the point, doesn't it, about listening to people, because when people feel that they're not listened to, that's when you get that conflict, and you can come across that in different scales. So I certainly see that as a line manager, I need to make space for the people that I manage and listen to them and to their challenges, their queries, their conflicts they're having in their private life as well as their work. But in the kind of program level, when we're talking multi-million pounds, it's also about where are the improvements that we can make? Are there efficiencies we can build in that means actually we can then free up time to do something else? And actually, for my role, can we do some more masterclasses or some more podcasts? It's absolutely scalable.
Okay, brilliant. And in terms of like your team, what would they say your leadership style was?
That's a good question. I would like to say that they wouldn't say I'm an aggressive leader. I very much try and lead by example in terms of the way I conduct myself and setting out expectations, making sure that we are being reasonable. I think in recent years, I've really focused on making sure that we time bound things, because I think that had been something that I hadn't necessarily done, which had led to kind of slip in kind of outputs. So I've definitely recognised that that's something that I have definitely worked on.
Super. So time bound has been a really good addition to your management and leadership style, because that gives certainty to people in the room that while you're very collaborative and collective, I get a sense of you being a collective leader as well, is that with the time bound, that gives you that underlying authority without becoming too aggressive or too dictatorial. So it sets the boundaries. And I think people work well with boundaries, don't they? And what happens when you feel really challenged in work and you feel out of your comfort zone? How do you navigate yourself in those moments, if they happen?
So I think there's probably two answers here. One is reflecting on previous bosses. In a past life, at some point in my career, I won't name, I had a boss that would just write, and this shows you how possibly how long ago it was, just used to write redo on work. From that moment I realized actually you need to be more constructive and you need to be more kind of open in that. And so that moment has kind of framed things. But also it's around when there has been challenge. So for example, in a large consultancy, and I've worked in quite a few large consultancies, there are processes and there are requirements, and quite often these are laid down in detail, but sometimes they're not. And sometimes I struggle when I'm pushing for something that has been done before and should be renewed, but there is a need to really re-justify what you're having to do. And sometimes I struggle with that because when it has been agreed previously, obviously it's met a threshold. But actually you have to kind of take a step back and think, okay, well, if this wasn't me and it was someone else, actually I would want to understand what the full picture of what the money is that you're asking for. And so it's just, for me, sometimes just taking that step back and kind of thinking, okay, take a deep breath. This isn't how I would do it. However, this is what I'm being asked to do. And certainly when it's senior leaders asking you to do that, there is, of course, that level of respect that you need to do. Of course, if it was completely inappropriate, I would be, raising that. But certainly when it's a particularly change of senior leadership style, that can lead to more what I perceive as more kind of admin-y requests. But actually it's reflecting that different people have different requirements, and that actually take a deep breath and do what's necessary because you want to get that output. So I'll ultimately want that invoice signed, and that's what I'm going to.
Yeah, so it's not always about being confrontational or being stuck in one position. It's about recognizing that you are in that system. Then sometimes we just have to suck it up. Yeah. Exactly. Suck it up and ask questions and maybe reflect on it afterwards is always handy as well. Ask questions before, like you said you used to do. And how do you offload outside of work, Claire? What is it that gives you that joy? Because it sounds like you've got a pretty busy work diary and professional diary with being on boards and being on members of institutes, having just finished your PhD. So how do you find time for yourself?
So I have a wonderful family who I love spending time with, and I know that sounds a bit cheesy, but I really do. But I also do some volunteering for a really wonderful charity called Free Cakes for Kids. And
that sounds good.
Yeah, it involves making kids cakes for their birthdays who wouldn't normally get one. So this might be a child who's in a women's refuge, who's under the care of social workers, who is having some sort of intervention that means that actually they're unlikely to get a birthday cake. So we get these requests from various agencies for a whole range of wonderful cakes that the kids are requesting. Spider-Man, Amy Winehouse, boxing, makeup. Peppa Pig comes up quite a lot, depending on the age. And we volunteer to make them a beautiful birthday cake, and then we drop it off with them. And that brings me a lot of joy because I just think, I know I'm in a privileged position to make my children cakes. But if I wasn't, I would be so happy that someone else had thought of doing that for my child. And particularly the women's refuges, that's a real powerful message to know that even though you are in a really terrible situation, someone cares enough to make your child a cake and help them celebrate their day with something joyful and something fun and hopefully something tasty.
That sounds beautiful, Claire. And it's interesting, isn't it? I asked you, the question was, how do you relax and decompress? And you mentioned your family, and it's not cheesy, it's absolutely fundamental, isn't it? The bedrock of stability is having that family who can love you unconditionally, highs and lows. But then you talked about giving back in the terms of more work in one sense, and with vulnerable people, which could be stressful. But, the research does show that if we are feeling slightly stressed, one of the great things we can do, as well as talk about it, is to go and help others. And it sounds like you're helping in a way that is meaningful for you and clearly meaningful for many other children. So, thank you for sharing that, and maybe give me the details, because I know that my kids love making cakes, and they're like, I'm going to make a carrot cake and it's going to have this. And I'm like, okay, how much is that going to cost me?
Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to ask you around one of the things that came up as you were talking. Clearly very passionate. I know for a fact your PhD's finished now. Have you done your Viva as well?
No, not yet.
Oh, so not quite finished.
Yeah, not quite over the finish line.
Oh, right. Well, let's not jinx it. We won't talk about that too much. But I wanted to ask, what next for Claire?
That is an excellent question. And to be honest, I genuinely don't know. I have, and this is probably a bit of another added thing. I've just been appointed to the TEDx Trafford Advisory Board, so supporting that will be something more different because it doesn't have focus on sustainability. But that language communication piece, I think, is really exciting. So whilst that's not a paid opportunity, I'm really excited about the exposure that will give me to that events kind of area and opportunity to work with new and different people as well. I will absolutely still be doing all my work on the retrofit world. There's some really great opportunities in terms of some development in the learning and development piece, as well as lots of the kind of sessions and conferences. 2 conferences coming up, which I think will be really great to be able to go to and present at, but also to attend and just learn. And I've been reflecting on this quite a bit, actually, around the reflection of what I know, but also what I don't know. And I always like to see and learn different things. And even if that is not quite my comfort zone, I think it is important to swim outside of your lane sometimes and see what's out there. But yes, I'm very much optimistic about kind of what that looks like in the future. And if we had this catch up in a year's time, who knows who knows what that might be, Barbara.
Yeah, no. Well, let's book it in then. Let's see what happens in the year. And just for clarity for the audience, not everybody will know what retrofit means. Would you mind explaining what you mean by retrofit?
Yeah, of course. So I work on kind of domestic retrofit. And what we're talking about is about improving that property in terms of its performance. So taking it from where it is and how it uses heat, how it uses energy, and improving it so that you're reducing the energy consumption, which ultimately means you're reducing the carbon associated with that. So things like wall insulation, changing windows, changing doors, installing solar panels, changing entire heating systems as well. But also it improves the comfort for that resident, that tenant, that owner-occupier, making that environment better. And I think that's one of the key things about homes in the UK. They're not overall the greatest performing buildings.
Yes.
We need, some powerful thinking and direction of change. But I'm absolutely positive that we will get there, and we will support people in their homes.
And I'm glad somebody's optimistic, Claire.
Well, I think I would just cry and be miserable otherwise. I think sometimes you've got to think of it as it's a marathon, not a sprint. And it's, one of the best analogies I think of is when that very large cargo ship got stuck in, was it the Suez Canal? And it took forever to turn and get it out and get it unstuck. But we did. And so with a lot of this, it's that you can't turn it quickly. So incremental changes, expertise, technology, listening, talking, we have to have all of these different things to move the direction of travel to mean that we have more sustainable homes, more sustainable built environment. Our impact on the kind of earth is reduced. But in the meantime, we're still enabling ourselves to enjoy life and like you said, find that joy in what we do. I think with some more direction and powerful leadership, I think we'll see some real changes for the benefit of lots and lots of people.
Thank you. And what about those people who are coming into the sector now, Claire? What would be your advice as somebody who's been around the block, made a massive contribution, still really passionate about the sector and about learning as well, and about playing the maximum part you can play in this environment? What would you advise to people who are just starting out?
I would say is get a really broad perspective. I started on a real kind of broad perspective of looking at sustainability and environmental practice, and about understanding how people work. Project management, I think, is how to manage what you're doing is a massive skill. Two of the graduates that I look after, that's essentially where they would fit if you were defining them. They absolutely manage projects, and so I would definitely say that. But also find the thing that really makes you interested and want to get out of bed in the morning. And there are so many different strands that you can look at, that I think there is definitely an opportunity to explore that. But also, I would say to reflect that actually that can change over time. And what you do right now will probably be different to what you're doing in 5 years. Will be probably something different that you're doing in the next 10 years. We've seen AI being used significantly more than maybe was expected, but we still need people to talk to people and deliver masterclasses and go on site visits. We also see changes in legislation. As soon as we have that, then we have to learn how to pivot and change. So things always change, and it's about getting experience. And if people say, I'm looking for a volunteer to help on this bid, this project, to go, to France, wherever it might be, to get some experience, I would say reach out and take those opportunities, because you might find absolutely what you want to be doing, but it might also help you in refining what you don't like doing. And certainly for me, over the years, I know finance is certainly something that I'm not a fan of doing, but it is a necessary thing that I have to, appreciate, understand, but also I will definitely ask for help on that one.
And I think it's important, isn't it, to be aware of what opportunities there are around and to put your hat in the ring if it aligns with your longer term goals. I mean, sometimes particularly women in the construction and housing and engineering sector are often encouraged to put their hands up to help with this, help with that, but it's almost like diverting them from their core goal of succeeding as a sustainability consultant. So I agree in the sense that, take the opportunities, especially if it's like going to do a project in France, absolutely. But with the vision of what's the value to me for this? What am I going to learn from that? And just before we leave, you talked a lot about learning, and I can tell you've got an appetite for that. Have you used coaches and mentors formally, informally, and would you recommend them to other people?
I've had certainly people who I would say have been mentors. I don't think on paper they would probably say that, but certainly when there are people who inspire you, it's one of the greatest things to be able to learn from them. One of my greatest ever managers, reflecting through what we've just been talking about, my management style reflects her style quite a lot in terms of being very collaborative. And I think in terms of how to kind of really frame it, it's an interesting one, because I've been but I haven't formally been a mentee, if that makes sense. I have applied to be a mentee this year, actually, for an external organisation, which I'm really looking forward to. And I think certainly my colleagues who have done like the reverse mentoring with senior leaders have definitely found that a benefit. And again, this comes back to opportunities. You can sit in your lane and just do. And if that's what you want to do, that's absolutely fine. But I think if you have aspirations for making a real difference and climbing the ladder, if that's what you're after, you have to kind of get out of that and do things a little bit differently. And I think coaching, absolutely, I think is an absolutely amazing opportunity to just not be led by the project you're doing, but is by, personally, and having that time to reflect. And certainly I think we talk about it much more now, which I think is a massive benefit. Yeah, I enjoy being a mentor, but also I find it incredibly rewarding listening to people, but also seeing the success when people, that you've worked with, really succeeding, because I think that's another powerful, positive outcome that we get to experience.
Yeah, we don't have to do it all on our own, do we? We're not all superheroes, solo superheroes. Claire, the time has gone really quickly, so we have to end it now. How can people get in touch with you if they want to? Are you open for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, definitely. Find me on LinkedIn is probably the best way. That would be really fantastic. Yeah, I really believe in the power of networks, and only burning bridges when they're essential. to not be going back to that. So very much, love a network, and learning from others is, such a powerful opportunity. And I think, I wouldn't be here without Barbara and I connecting. So thank you so much.
No. Thank you. And I just love your energy, Claire. Really uplifting it is. Really energising. So thank you for sharing some time with us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Unlikely Executive. If today's conversation challenged you, encouraged you, or gave you clarity about how you lead, then make sure you follow the show so that you never miss an episode. I'm Barbra Carlisle, helping leaders who never expected to be in charge show up with courage and fairness and conviction. Until next time, lead well, stay honest, and keep doing the work that matters.